The rain had been falling for 3 days straight, turning the streets of downtown Los Angeles into a maze of puddles and streaming gutters. Under the faded green awning of Morrison's Diner on Sunset Boulevard, 16-year-old Marcus Chen huddled against the brick wall, his worn backpack pulled tight against his chest. The thin cardboard he'd been sleeping on had long since dissolved into a soggy mess, but the awning provided just enough shelter to keep him marginally dry. Marcus pulled his sketch pad closer, protecting it with his body like a shield. The pad was his most precious possession, a birthday gift from his art teacher 2 years ago, back when he still had a home, a school, and a future that seemed possible. Now, with only a few pages left, each sheet felt as valuable as gold. The diner's warm glow spilled out onto the sidewalk, carrying with it the scent of coffee and bacon that made his empty stomach clench with hunger. He'd been surviving on the kindness of strangers and the occasional meal from the shelter when they had space, which wasn't often. Today marked his 4th day without a proper meal. A black motorcycle pulled up to the curb, its engine purring to a stop. Marcus watched as a tall figure in a dark jacket dismounted, removing a helmet to reveal shoulder-length dark hair. Even in the dim streetlight, there was something familiar about the man's profile, the way he moved with quiet confidence as he secured his bike. The man paused at the diner's entrance, seeming to notice Marcus for the first time. Their eyes met briefly. The stranger's gaze was kind, without the usual mixture of pity and disgust that Marcus had grown accustomed to. Instead of looking away or hurrying inside, the man nodded slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement that treated Marcus like a human being rather than an inconvenience. "Evening," the man said simply, his voice warm despite the cool night air. "Evening," Marcus replied, surprised by the normalcy of the interaction. The man disappeared into the diner, and Marcus found himself reaching for his pencil, a stubby thing worn down to about 2 inches, but still capable of creating magic on paper. There had been something about the stranger's face, something that demanded to be captured. The kindness in his eyes, the way the streetlight had caught the angle of his jaw, the casual grace of his movements. Marcus flipped to a fresh page in his sketch pad and began to draw, his hand moving with the fluid certainty that came from years of practice. He started with the basic shapes, the oval of the face, the strong line of the jaw, the thoughtful set of the eyes. As he worked, the details emerged, the slight scruff of facial hair, the way one corner of the mouth turned up slightly, the depth in those dark eyes that suggested someone who had seen both joy and sorrow. But he was running out of space on the page, and his pencil was becoming too dull to capture the finer details. Marcus looked around desperately and spotted a crumpled napkin that had blown against the building. He smoothed it out on his lap. It was rough and uneven, but it would have to do. Using the side of his pencil, he began transferring the essence of the drawing to the napkin, working quickly before the image in his mind faded. The napkin's texture gave the portrait an unexpected depth, the rough fibers catching the graphite in ways that added character to every line. As he worked, Marcus found himself completely absorbed in the process. This was what he lived for, these moments when the world disappeared and there was nothing but the art flowing from his mind through his hand onto whatever surface he could find. He'd drawn on cardboard, paper bags, the backs of receipts, even in the dust on car windows. But there was something special about this portrait, something that made him feel like he was capturing more than just a face. The diner door chimed, and the motorcycle rider emerged, carrying a to-go cup and a paper bag. Marcus quickly covered the napkin, suddenly self-conscious about his work. The man paused again, glancing over at Marcus's makeshift shelter. "Cold night," the stranger observed, steam rising from his coffee cup. "I've seen worse," Marcus replied, though he was shivering despite his attempt to appear nonchalant. The man seemed to consider something, then walked over to his motorcycle. Marcus watched as he opened one of the saddlebags and pulled out what looked like a thick blanket. Without ceremony, he walked back over and held it out. "This might help," he said simply. Marcus stared at the blanket, overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness. I can't take that. It's yours." "I've got heat at home," the man replied with a slight smile. "Besides, it's just sitting in my bag most of the time. Might as well be put to good use." Marcus accepted the blanket with trembling hands. It was soft and warm, clearly expensive. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. The stranger nodded and was about to turn away when he noticed the corner of the napkin peeking out from under Marcus's arm. "Are you an artist?" Marcus felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment. I draw sometimes. It's not very good. May I see?" Every instinct told Marcus to refuse, to hide his amateur work from this kind stranger who had already done so much. But something in the man's genuine interest made him slowly pull out the napkin portrait. The stranger's eyes widened as he took in the drawing. For a long moment, he was completely silent, studying every line and shadow. Marcus held his breath, waiting for polite dismissal or false praise. "This is—" The man paused, looking from the napkin to Marcus and back again. "This is incredible. You drew this just now?" Marcus nodded, suddenly finding it difficult to speak. "The detail, the emotion you've captured, this is professional-level work." The stranger looked at Marcus with new eyes. "You have a genuine gift." "It's just something I do," Marcus mumbled, but he felt a warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the blanket. "What's your name?" Marcus Chen." "Well, Marcus, I'm Keanu." He held out his hand and Marcus shook it, still clutching the napkin portrait. "I mean it. You're incredibly talented. Have you had formal training?" "A little, in high school. Before." Marcus trailed off, not wanting to explain the series of events that had led him to the streets. Keanu seemed to sense the pain behind the unfinished sentence. "Well, talent like this shouldn't go to waste." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. "I know some people in the art world. Maybe we could help you get into a program, or find a gallery interested in your work." Marcus stared at the card, unable to process what was happening. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." "Because art matters," Keanu said simply, "and because everyone deserves a chance to share their gifts with the world." A gust of wind suddenly whipped around the corner, and the napkin portrait was torn from Marcus's grasp. Both men lunged for it, but the wind carried it up and away, tumbling end over end down the dark street until it disappeared into the night. "No!" Marcus cried out, watching his work vanish. It was the best thing he'd ever drawn, and now it was gone. "Hey, it's okay," Keanu said, placing a gentle hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You can always draw another one." But Marcus was already shaking his head. "You don't understand. I only have a few pages left, and my pencil's almost gone, and I can't afford—" He stopped, realizing how pathetic he sounded. Keanu was quiet for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notepad and a pen. "Here, take these. And that business card. I meant what I said. When you're ready, call that number." "I don't have a phone," Marcus admitted quietly. "Then find a way to get in touch. Ask someone to make the call for you. Promise me you'll try." Marcus nodded, though he couldn't imagine how he would ever be in a position to follow through. Keanu mounted his motorcycle and started the engine. "Take care of yourself, Marcus, and keep drawing. The world needs your art." With that, he was gone, leaving Marcus alone under the awning with a warm blanket, a new notebook, and a business card that might as well have been a ticket to the moon. 3 days later, Keanu Reeves sat in his home office, staring at his computer screen with an intensity that had his assistant, David, concerned. "You've been at this for hours," David said, setting down a cup of tea on the desk. "Maybe it's time to take a break?" Keanu didn't look up from the screen, which displayed the 4th page of Google search results for Marcus Chen, homeless artist, Los Angeles. He'd been searching variations of the same terms for 3 days, following every lead, no matter how tenuous. "He's out there somewhere," Keanu muttered, clicking on another link. "Probably still sleeping in doorways while I sit here in my comfortable house." "You gave him your card," David pointed out. "If he wants to get in touch, he will." Keanu finally looked up, his eyes reflecting a mixture of frustration and determination. "You didn't see that drawing, David. It was like he could see into my soul and put it down on paper. That kind of talent, living on the streets, it's not right." David had seen his employer passionate about many causes over the years, but this felt different, more personal. "What exactly are you planning to do if you find him?" "Help him," Keanu said simply. "Get him into an art program. Find him a place to live. Make sure he has the tools he needs to develop his gift." He turned back to the computer. I've already contacted 3 art schools and 2 galleries. Everyone who's heard me describe his work is interested in meeting him. Based on a drawing you saw for 30 seconds on a napkin that blew away in the wind? Keanu's fingers paused over the keyboard. You know how sometimes you meet someone and you just know they're going to change your life? That's what this feels like. That kid didn't just draw my face, he captured something deeper, something I didn't even know was there. David settled into the chair across from the desk. Okay, so what's the plan? I've been thinking about that. Keanu pulled up a new tab and began typing. I'm going to put up a notice, online, in local papers, maybe even on social media, a message for Marcus, letting him know I'm looking for him. That could attract a lot of attention. Copycats, people claiming to be him. I don't care. He needs to know that the offer was real. Keanu's hands moved quickly over the keys. And I'm going to put a reward up. Not for turning him in, but for information that helps me help him. David watched his friend work, recognizing the single-minded focus that Keanu brought to everything he cared about. You really think he'll see it? I have to hope he will, or that someone who knows him will. Keanu finished typing and leaned back in his chair. The alternative is that he's out there somewhere, believing that his art doesn't matter, that he doesn't matter, and I can't live with that. Within hours, the message was live on multiple platforms. To Marcus Chen, the talented young artist I met outside Morrison's Diner on Sunset Boulevard 3 nights ago. Your portrait on the napkin was extraordinary. I meant what I said about helping you pursue your art. Please reach out. The offer stands. Keanu. Along with contact information and a promise that anyone helping to locate Marcus would receive a donation to the homeless charity of their choice. Marcus had no idea that his name was spreading across social media. He'd spent the last 3 days trying to make Keanu's notebook and pen last, rationing his art like medicine. The blanket had quite literally been a lifesaver. The temperatures had dropped significantly, and without it, he might not have survived the previous night. He was currently sitting in the doorway of a closed bookstore, carefully working on a portrait of an elderly woman who'd given him $1 and a sandwich earlier that day. She'd reminded him of his grandmother, and he wanted to capture the kindness in her weathered face. Excuse me, are you Marcus? He looked up to see a young woman with purple hair and kind eyes. She was holding a smartphone, its screen displaying something he couldn't quite make out. Depends who's asking, Marcus replied cautiously. He'd learned to be wary of strangers, especially those who seemed too interested in him. My name's Sarah. I work at the community center a few blocks from here. She crouched down to his level, showing him the phone screen. Someone's been looking for you. Marcus stared at the screen, reading Keanu's message over and over. His hands began to shake as the words sank in. This is real? He whispered. According to the internet, very real. Keanu Reeves has been posting this message everywhere for the past day and a half. There are news articles, social media posts. You're kind of famous. Marcus felt dizzy. I don't understand. Why would he? Because you must have made quite an impression. Sarah sat down beside him on the cold concrete. Do you want to get in touch with him? Marcus looked down at the notebook in his lap, at the half-finished portrait of the kind woman. What if this is some kind of mistake? What if he doesn't really remember me, or he changed his mind? Sarah gently took the notebook from his hands and looked at the drawing. Her eyes widened. Oh my God, you really are an artist. This is beautiful. It's not finished. It doesn't need to be. The emotion, the life in her eyes. Sarah looked up at him with new respect. If this is the kind of work you can do with a ballpoint pen on cheap paper, I can see why Keanu Reeves wants to help you. Marcus felt tears building behind his eyes. For so long he'd felt invisible, like he was fading away a little more each day. The idea that someone not only saw him but valued his art enough to search for him was overwhelming. Will you help me contact him? Marcus asked quietly. Sarah was already dialing the number from the post. Of course. The phone rang exactly twice before David answered. Keanu Reeves' office. This is David. Hi, this is Sarah Martinez from the Downtown Community Center. I think I've found Marcus Chen. There was a pause, then the sound of rapid movement. Hold on, let me get Keanu. Within seconds, a familiar voice came on the line. This is Keanu. Is Marcus okay? Sarah looked at the young man sitting beside her, who was listening to every word with a mixture of hope and terror on his face. He's here with me, and he's safe. Would you like to talk to him? Yes, please. Sarah handed the phone to Marcus, who took it with trembling hands. Marcus, is that really you? It's me, Marcus managed to say, his voice cracking. Thank God. I've been worried sick. Are you safe? Do you have somewhere warm to stay? I'm okay. I have the blanket you gave me, and the notebook. I've been drawing every day. Good. That's good. Keanu's relief was evident even through the phone. Listen, I want to see you. Are you willing to meet somewhere? Maybe grab some food and talk about those art programs I mentioned? Marcus looked at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. Yes, I'd like that. Perfect. Sarah, are you still there? Sarah took the phone back. I'm here. Can you bring him to Morton's Steakhouse on Melrose? I'll be there in an hour. And Sarah, thank you, really. After Sarah hung up, she turned to Marcus. How are you feeling? Marcus was staring at the notebook in his lap, but his mind was racing ahead to possibilities he'd never dared to imagine. Scared, he admitted, and hopeful, and like maybe my life is about to change completely. Change can be good, Sarah said gently, especially when it's moving you towards something better. What if I'm not good enough? What if he sees more of my work and realizes he made a mistake? Sarah stood up and offered him her hand. Then you'll deal with that when it happens. But from what I've seen, I don't think that's going to be a problem. An hour later, Marcus sat across from Keanu Reeves in a restaurant that was fancier than any place he'd ever imagined eating. The waiter had looked askance at Marcus's appearance. Unwashed hair, clothes that had seen better days, the smell of the streets that clung to him like a second skin. But Keanu had handled it with such casual authority that the staff had quickly adjusted their attitude. Order whatever you want, Keanu said, not even looking at his own menu. When's the last time you had a proper meal? A few days ago, Marcus admitted, though it had been longer than that since he'd had anything more substantial than a sandwich or a cup of soup. Then we're starting with appetizers, and soup, and probably dessert. Keanu's eyes were warm with concern. You're too thin. As they waited for their food, Keanu leaned forward. I want you to know that everything I said the other night was true. You have extraordinary talent, Marcus, the kind that comes along maybe once in a generation. You really think so? Marcus's voice was small, uncertain. I know so, which is why I've spent the last 3 days setting things up. Keanu pulled out a folder and placed it on the table between them. I've spoken with 3 different art schools. All of them are willing to offer you full scholarships based on my recommendation alone, though they'll want to see your portfolio, of course. Marcus stared at the folder as if it might bite him. I don't have a portfolio, just a few drawings in that notebook. Then, that's what we'll start with. I've also spoken with a gallery owner who specializes in emerging artists. She's interested in featuring your work in a group show next month, if you're up for it. A gallery? My work? Marcus's head was spinning. I don't understand. Why are you doing all this? Keanu was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. Because I know what it's like to feel lost, to feel like the world doesn't see you, or that what you have to offer doesn't matter. He met Marcus's eyes directly, and because that drawing you did, it showed me something about myself I didn't even know was there. That's not just talent, Marcus. That's a gift. The food arrived, more food than Marcus had seen in one place in months. As he ate, trying not to embarrass himself by wolfing it down too quickly, Keanu talked about the practical details. There was an apartment, modest but clean, that Keanu had already arranged to pay the first year's rent on. There were art supplies, enough to last months. There was even a small stipend to cover basic living expenses while Marcus got on his feet. This is too much, Marcus said finally, putting down his fork even though he was still hungry. I can't accept all this. I haven't done anything to deserve it. That drawing says otherwise. Keanu leaned back in his chair. But if it makes you feel better, think of it as an investment. I believe your art is going to be worth something someday. A lot if you develop it properly. Consider this a loan against future earnings. Marcus picked up his fork again, but his hands were shaking. What if I fail? What if I can't do it? then you'll have failed while trying to build something meaningful, instead of failing while giving up. Keanu's voice was gentle but firm. Either way, you'll still be better off than you are now. And if I succeed, Keanu smiled, then the world gets to see what I saw in that napkin portrait. And you get to spend your life doing what you love, sharing your gift with others who need to see it. Marcus looked around the restaurant, at the clean tablecloths and polished silverware, at the other diners who belonged in places like this. A week ago, he'd been invisible, existing in the spaces between other people's lives. Now he was sitting across from a movie star who was offering to change his entire world. "Okay," he said quietly. "Yes, I want to try." Keanu's smile lit up his entire face. "Good, we start tomorrow." 6 months later, Marcus stood in front of his first solo exhibition at the Henderson Gallery. The walls were lined with his work, pencil drawings, charcoal sketches, and even a few small paintings he'd been experimenting with. The opening night crowd was larger than he'd expected, a mix of art collectors, students from his new school, and people from the community who'd heard his story. But the piece that drew the most attention was displayed in the center of the main wall. It was a recreation of the napkin portrait, painted in oils on canvas. He'd worked on it for weeks, trying to capture not just Keanu's face, but the moment itself. The kindness of a stranger, the hope born from an unexpected encounter, the way one person's belief in you could change everything. "It's perfect," said a voice behind him. Marcus turned to find Keanu approaching, dressed in a simple black suit and looking proud enough to burst. "I wasn't sure I'd captured it right," Marcus admitted, turning back to study the painting. "That night feels like a dream sometimes. Trust me, you got it exactly right." Keanu stood beside him, both men looking at the portrait. "Though I think you've improved the original model significantly." Marcus laughed. "The original model was pretty good to work with. Any regrets about the path that brought you here?" Marcus considered the question seriously. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of classes, gallery meetings, and slowly learning how to live like a normal person again. There had been difficult moments, times when he'd felt out of place in his new world, times when the trauma of homelessness had caught up with him despite his changed circumstances. But looking around at the gallery, at the people genuinely interested in his work, at the future that was opening up before him like a road with no end. "No regrets," he said finally. "Even the hard parts brought me here." Keanu nodded. "That's all any of us can ask for, that our struggles lead us to something meaningful." A woman approached them, introducing herself as a reporter from the local arts magazine. As she spoke with Marcus about his work and his journey, Keanu stepped back, watching with quiet satisfaction. He thought about the napkin portrait that had blown away that windy night, how its loss had led to something far greater than either of them could have imagined. Sometimes the things we lose turn out to be exactly what we needed to let go of. Sometimes a chance encounter on a dark street can illuminate a path we never knew existed. And sometimes the most valuable thing you can give someone is simply the belief that their gifts matter. Marcus excused himself from the reporter and walked over to where Keanu stood by the window, looking out at the bustling street below. "Thank you," Marcus said simply, "for seeing me, for believing in me, for changing my life." Keanu turned from the window and smiled. "Thank you for that portrait, for showing me that kindness creates art, and art creates hope, and hope creates possibilities we never imagined." Outside, the city hummed with life, countless stories unfolding, countless encounters waiting to happen, countless chances for one person to change another's world with a simple act of recognition and care. And somewhere out there, perhaps, another young artist was waiting to be seen, waiting for someone to believe in the gift they carried within them. Marcus looked around at his exhibition one more time, then picked up his sketch pad, a new one, thick with clean pages and infinite possibilities, and began to draw.